Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Big at the Back podcast. I'm Tom. I'm coming in with a slightly sore head this morning. Matt, how are you?
I am fantastic. The sun is shining for what feels like the first time in about a month, and I actually went in the office for the second time since the start of COVID yesterday. But I feel fresh as a daisy.
What was it like seeing Canary Wharf in all of its former glory?
Oh, it was beautiful, beautiful as ever.
Goodness me. Canary Wharf's so dull and grey. I don't think it's ever been beautiful. So everyone, before we start, I just want to give a little plug. Please do like and subscribe this video. Please do follow us on Twitter at Big at the Back. We are close to a round number of Twitter followers, and that would mean the world to us.
We briefly got there, and then someone's been toying with us.
Yeah, I think there's a few bot accounts that have just been following and unfollowing, but you know, it's always just getting to that round 100 will be a real big achievement. So everyone, if you're listening, thank you, but also like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. We have a lot of bad opinions, and they're worth following. Just the entertainment more than anything.
Well, if you're not getting all of the entertainment from our bad opinions, just listening to us, you can read them as well. What more could you ask for?
Exactly, living the dream. Right, so lots to talk about today. What we're going to do is go through blank game week 27, look at the fixtures individually, look at how we both got on and what we both thought of those fixtures. And then, as usual, we'll look at our teams, how we've done, and exactly what our plans are for the next few weeks, which look absolutely manic. So to dive in, let's start with a good game to start with, actually, is Southampton 2, Norwich 0, because I thought this was incredibly entertaining. Unfortunately, Broja continues to frustrate, and the Broja versus Jimenez argument tends to be a who can get the least points argument rather than who can get the most at the moment, and is very much frustrating. Che Adams, he scored 3 goals all season before the last 2 games, and then he's just popped up with 2 in a row. Did you get a chance to watch any of this game, Matt?
I did indeed, actually. Yeah, it was, like you say, it was Norwich were poor, which is pretty much what we expect from them most weeks now. And Southampton looked good. Obviously, we sat here on Thursday morning, and they obviously beat West Ham in the FA Cup last night as well. They're on a really good run of form. I think they've only lost one of their they've lost once since December. So they're really in a good run of form. They've got, I was talking to a couple of friends about this. They haven't really got, like, other than potentially James Ward-Prowse, they haven't got like a superstar player, but they're a very solid team. So I'm not including Broja as a superstar. He's a good player, but he's not a superstar. But they're just a very solid team, and they all know their jobs. They do them well, and like we've said, they've got sort of a few options up front, and it seems to be Che Adams at the moment, unfortunately for you, that's getting on the end of things. I was looking at the XG for the game was Southampton's was 2.86. So that shows just how one-sided it was. Norwich's was 0.4. So they just cut them to shreds. And Romeo's goal was an absolutely lovely strike.
Yeah, brilliant, wasn't it? Is Kyle Walker-Peters a better option now than, dare I say it, Lord Livramento? I think he's a bit more nailed on in that Saints defence that are really looking very good. I think KWP with 9 points this week as well. So is he now defensively moving forwards, considering their fixtures, potentially a better option, given I think he's got a bit more of a guaranteed place in the side?
It's really tough because they're really strong in those fullback positions. They've got Walker-Peters, they've got Livramento, they've got Perrault, who scored for them last night, a worldy strike that was. They are sort of really blessed in those positions. Last night, Livramento was on the bench. He came on in the second half. Walker-Peters started the game. Yeah. I think it's one where you could get tucked up a little bit either way, regardless, because they are liable to be rotated. So if it was down to me, it depends on, I think we're still in that stage now. You're not really looking at money. Obviously, there's Walker-Peters is 4.8 as opposed to Livramento, who's 4.4. So it depends on your budget. But I think if I had to go with one at the moment, I'd probably be going Walker-Peters, and it feels very dirty to say that.
Yeah, I mean, we all love Livramento for what he's done this season, but I tend to agree with you. I think Walker Peters is, at least in my mind, a more consistent option moving forward. I don't think there's much to say about Norwich. No one with a brain is invested in Norwich from a fantasy standpoint. Unfortunately, I still do think they're nailed on for relegation, and I think they've gone back to the Norwich from the beginning of the season where they're just getting whitewashed every week.
Yeah, Smith made a little bit of an impact when he first came in. And they even got out of the relegation zone at one point, but now they're back rooted to the bottom of the table. And if they carry on like this, you can't see them getting out of it.
Yeah, I think it's very reminiscent actually of Fulham last year, where they had a period mid-season where they started looking very good and started climbing out of that relegation. And then the end of the season, the final third came and they just fell to pieces. I think Norwich are going down a similar kind of route at the moment, watching them play.
Yeah, I think it is going to be interesting, this relegation battle. I think it will go down right towards the wire. I think it's last game of the season, I think, as well, is Leeds v Everton. So that could be a big one.
Oh, the joy I will feel if Leeds win and Everton go down. The next game to discuss is, speaking of them, Leeds 0 versus Spurs 4. And he's back. Harry Kane is back. Harry Kane, as an FPL asset, I feel confident in saying it for the first time this season, is back. He was, just like he was against City, he was sensational. And even if you look against Burnley, the underlying stats were still really good for him. As an FPL asset, I think Kane is back. And he's part of my plans for this week. Doherty, like, no one's ever buying Doherty. Like, the fact that he got 50 bonus point or 50 on the BPS is a mystery to me. But other than that, I think Kane is the story. That being said, as we discussed a few weeks ago, Leeds are not a good indicator of how good teams are. But I don't think you can deny how good Kane was.
Yeah, he was fantastic in this game. Like you say, he was back to the Kane that played against City, not the Kane against Burnley. Is he back? That's my question. I just feel like the amount of money you'd have to invest in Kane, you want consistent returns. It feels like one week you're going to get this Kane that we saw, but the next week you're going to get shit Kane, the Kane that played against Burnley and the Kane that played against Middlesbrough in midweek in the FA Cup. So, like, I would like to see him be back, because it's good for us, not just as fantasy football fans, as England fans as well, going into a World Cup later this year. We want to see him doing well. Mm-hmm. I think he did play really well. The fullbacks as well were the other story in this one. Like you say, Doherty picking up the bonus points, a goal and an assist, and Sessegnon also chipping in with an assist. Clean sheets, obviously, all round. One goal was a Sessegnon assist for a Doherty finish, like just one wing back to the other. But like you say, at the moment, beating Leeds doesn't mean anything. They've now got rid of Bielsa, which sort of was surprising, but also obviously not based on the results.
No one survives those results. No one, and we love Bielsa. We love what he's done at Leeds, but no one survives getting hammered that badly every week.
No, and it'll be interesting to see how they do under Jesse Marsch now that he's come in. He's obviously out of the Red Bull Academy. He worked under Rangnick at Leipzig. And he was Leipzig's manager earlier this season, but then was relieved of his duties just around Christmas time. Be interesting to see how they shape up after this. They did have a 1.7 XG in this game, so they are still making chances, where at Spurs' was 2.14. So if you look at those stats, the game's a lot closer than it actually says. Lloris made some good saves. He saved them the clean sheet, I think, in my eyes, because they're still there to be gotten at defensively, Leeds. But like you say, it's the Kane and Son show, really. That's who everyone's looking at. But my pick for a Spurs player at the moment is Kulusevski. I'm opening up to the idea of getting him in because he's playing on that other wing. He's only 6 million. So like that's like 4 million, 4.5 million less than Son, playing in a similar role. So I think that's a potential bargain.
So Kulusevski is in my plan, not for this week, but for next week when the Villa fixtures turns and I can get rid of Coutinho for him. However, I actually think that Kulusevski, being as good as he is, makes Son a worse FPL asset because when Kane is basically playing in that quarterback role, and when he gets the ball and Kulusevski's on the field, then it's not just an automatically to where Son's running. He's got to take a pick out of the two because Kulusevski's movement is so good as well. So I think Kulusevski playing makes Son a worse pick fantasy-wise. And as soon as Kulusevski went off, Kane got the ball, pinged it straight to Son without hesitation, goal. I don't think it was when Kulusevski came off, Son scoring was a coincidence. I think Kulusevski playing makes Son a worse asset. So I think move heaven and earth to get Kane in. I am. I don't think Son is worth necessarily touching, and Kulusevski I think is just as good, if not a better option because of the price point. So I'm in agreement with you there.
I hope you're right that he makes Son worse, because that will do me a favour in all my mini leagues if everyone's got Son and I can get Kulusevski in. But we'll see.
So next game to talk about is Brentford 0 to Newcastle. And let's talk about Joe Linton's transformation into a central midfielder, because I'll be honest, that wasn't on my 2022 bingo card.
It's a strange one, isn't it? And you've got to give Eddie Howe a lot of credit, because he was floundering as a striker. He was obviously ridiculed for his poor goal-scoring record. But in this role now, it's strange the way Newcastle are playing at the moment. And it sort of all pivots around Joe Linton. When they haven't got the ball, he's a holding mid. And he's sort of trying to break up play. And he's in there. He's a big presence. But when they do get the ball, he just bombs forward and just runs. It's like Forrest Gump. He just keeps running and running and running. And then he gets into the area to try and get on those balls from the fullbacks. It's, like you say, no one saw this coming, but you can't argue it's been effective. They've now won 4 and drawn 1 of their last 5 games. So, like, Newcastle assets are worth looking at the moment. They've got a double-double coming up. And they're all fairly all right fixtures. None of them you look at and we're really like, ugh. So we're all sort of waiting and trying to find out from Eddie Howe if St. Maximan's going to be back. And people are looking at Willock again, because obviously he's scored in 2 of their last 3. So, yeah, it helped in this game that Brentford went down to 10 men early doors, and they are a very bad side at the moment. I think they've got 1 point in the last 8 or 9 games.
Yeah, they're the worst team in the league at the moment, by far.
They're riding off their early season form. If it wasn't for that, you'd be looking at them like alongside Norwich, really.
Well, I think you can look at them alongside Norwich. I think both are going down. It's just a case of, will it be Leeds or everything that joins them, in my mind. Worth touching at least on Willock, because I know you mentioned him before, but last season he went on a ridiculous run of form. I think he scores in about 6 or 7 games in a row or something like that, right at the end of the season. I'm considering looking at jumping on the Willock bandwagon early. And I may be too early, but it's certainly under consideration for my transfer plans, because at the moment, or maybe next week, I'll bring in Kulusevski and Willock as a replacement for Bowen and Coutinho, is the thinking at the moment. But I think Joe Willock is certainly an option to consider with the fixtures coming up. No one else really I would look at. Shout out as well to Shah, being my 3rd sub and getting 12 points. Cheers, Shah. But
ouch.
But that aside, I can't really see anyone else that's worth looking at from Newcastle.
No, I think they're leaky at the back, so you're not really banking on them for clean sheets. The only person I potentially, like, if Trippier didn't have that injury, I'd be looking at him purely for his set pieces. But other than that, yeah, I think Willock's the main one. St. Maximan, if he's back fit, Chris Wood is not doing anything. He had a couple of chances in this game and missed them as well. So, yeah, I don't think there's much else to look at there.
Agreed. Rattling through then the next 2 games, because the next one is Aston Villa 2, Brighton 0. And a clean sheet for Digne when I was on the free hits and didn't have Digne. Great. Worth noting that Brighton's home form is horrendous. I didn't realise how bad it was. I think they've got 1 win in the last 5 months at home. Their home form is utterly shocking. Now, I've been to the Amex. I'm sure you probably have at some point. The Brighton fans aren't exactly loud or supportive. But away from home, Brighton seems to be doing well. But home form has just gone off a cliff. And also, Matty Cash with his goal. What a hit that was.
Great strike, yeah. I'm just looking back at Brighton's home form now. They won on Boxing Day against Brentford, so that doesn't count. Before that, Their last win at home was in September, the 19th of September over Leicester. And if you count the League Cup, they beat Swansea 3 days later. So yeah, that is a very worrying for them. Obviously, normally it's your home form that carries you, and we saw a sort of reversal of that a little bit during COVID and behind closed doors. But that is concerning for them. They won't be looking too worried. They're not going to be looking over their shoulders. They're still sat in 10th. But yeah, that's something they'll definitely want to turn around. They were poor defensively in this game. The second goal, just a long ball over the top from Mings, and Watkins just got on the end of it. So Potter is a good coach. I think he'll turn it around. But again, I'm not really looking at any Brighton assets at the moment. Villa, again, they're sort of... You don't really know what you're getting with Villa. They're there or thereabouts. Like, I'm not looking at any of their assets, really. What people have still... If you've still got Watkins, I don't think you're moving off of him, purely because he is still liable to get a goal. Like, Dean, I had him for this week, but I'm wild carding this week, and he's probably out. The only one is Coutinho for me.
I think with the double they have, Villa assets for me are staying for another week, and next week I can see dropping one or both of them, and the other one will be relegated to the bench. It just depends on what I do with Jared Bowen, but yeah, their fixtures going forward as well do take a turn after this double, and I think it's a good time for them to pick up a win. But asset-wise, I don't think there's any I'm really looking at very strongly in the same way that we were 4 or 5 weeks ago.
No, I completely agree. Like you, I'll be keeping Coutinho in for the double, potentially Ramsey as well because he's cheap. But after that, at least one of them, if not both, are going.
Yeah, definitely. Crystal Palace won, Burnley won. The game that completely trolled FPL managers. Oh no, it's the next game that trolled FPL managers. But Crystal Palace won, Burnley won. And while we're here, we might as well. Leicester 2, Burnley 0. So talk to me about Burnley and their big double game week when everyone's tripled up on Burnley.
It's happened again, isn't it? How have we not learned by now that you just...
I told you Kane with a single was better than Vegas with a double. I got burned by Josh King once. I'm not going down that rabbit hole again.
It's so frustrating. And look, I should know better by now. See, I had Vegas captain, so I also had me in, obviously, no clean sheets. Me subbed off in the first half of the second game. And the only goal they've got in these double game weeks was an own goal. So you're not even looking at anyone. And Lennon got the assist for that. And no one had Lennon. So I was just looking at actually their XG against Leicester was 1.21. And against Palace, it was 0.29, which is shockingly low. It was the lowest of the week, apart from Brentford. So it seems as though they were just lacking that creativity. They weren't making the right chances. I didn't really see much of either game, so I'm only going based on the highlights. But the interesting one in the second game, at least, is Vardy back?
Oh, I don't have the mental capacity to put myself through that. I mean, Vardy is the ultimate purple patch player. If he gets on the pitch and is scoring goals, then he'll score 1 or 2 every single game, regardless of who he's playing against. But then he'll go 7 or 8 games without any FPL returns. I'm not putting myself through that again. Is Vardy an option over the next few weeks, do you think, for Leicester?
Their fixtures are sort of hit and miss. They've got a couple of tricky ones in there. But other than that, I mean, they play Leeds this week at home. And that's sort of almost really hard to tell at the moment because obviously Marsh has just come in and you don't know how they're going to change and play under him. But in the next few weeks after that, they also face Brentford, Palace and Newcastle. And then you've got Man U thrown in there as well. So, like you say, he's a real purple patch player. So, and he loves playing against the big teams. His record against Arsenal from memory is fantastic. And I'm going to look it up while you say what you've got to say.
Well, I was about to say, I don't think Leicester really have any tough games left. They've got Arsenal in 29, but then Man U is not a tough game at the moment. Tottenham actually could be, but Tottenham are very hit and miss. And they don't have to play Liverpool. They don't have to play Chelsea. They don't have to play City. They're done with the toughest fixtures. So because they're not doubling, I think it's or they haven't got any confirmed doubles, I think it's very difficult to justify bringing them in immediately. But from 30 onwards, really, I think Maddison and Vardy are going to be really strong options, particularly as we get to the end of the season and we get to those last 5 game weeks. I think Vardy in particular could be a really nice differential.
Just to back myself up here, here's the 4 teams he scored against more than any other in the Premier League. He scored 8 against Spurs, 9 against City, 10 against Liverpool, and 11 against Arsenal. So against that traditional big 6, he performs, which obviously maybe sort of means you don't want him in for this run where they've got good fixtures.
Yeah, very much the anti-form player, isn't he?
Yeah, that Spurs one's very interesting, actually, because not only did he have 8 goals, he also had 5 assists in 15 games against Spurs. That is some record.
Yeah, and that's arguably the toughest game they have left this season. Worth considering. Looking at a fixture that really confused and flabbergasted me, to be honest, is Man U 0, Watford 0, because Bruno Fernandes, I think, had a higher XG than half of the teams in the Premier League this year with this fixture alone. And Watford, Foster made some great saves and deservedly got all 3 bonus points. But how can Watford concede 4 to Crystal Palace, then go away to United and hold them to a draw? And as bad as Man U are, it just doesn't make sense. We're not living in a world that makes sense from a football perspective, Matt.
It never has made sense. Like we've been looking at this, and there was a tweet going around a few weeks ago. It's like we spend ages analysing every stat and combing over our FPL teams, and then one day we look at it and we hate it. But yeah, this game Man U was shocking. They made chances. They had the highest XG of the week at 2.53. But Foster, he made some good saves, but they didn't work him enough for the amount of chances they created. At one point, Ronaldo blocked Bruno's goal-bound shot. He also missed a chance late on. And it's this Man United at the moment. They're so feast or famine. That's why people are moving off the likes of Ronaldo and even Bruno. They're not reliable for the price point they're at. And I just don't understand them. And Watford, again, after me saying about how they've shaped up at the back and sort of tightened things up a little bit, then they concede 4 to Palace and make me look stupid. And then they go to Old Trafford and keep a clean sheet. I just don't understand football, and I never will.
I'm very much in agreement. Looking at United, if anyone listening owns any United assets, if you've kept Ronaldo or Bruno for this game, if you've got one of the defenders, it's time to get off. They have the worst fixtures for the rest of the season out of any of the Premier League teams. Even if you're looking at the next load of fixtures, I think it's City away, Tottenham, Liverpool, Leicester, and they've got Arsenal in there as well. Their fixtures look horrendous. So I would be avoiding Man United at all costs. They were rubbish against Watford, etc. So I think they'll continue to be rubbish against the big teams.
So what you're telling me is between now and the end of the season, no one will get more points than Bruno.
That sounds about right, yes. Cool. So that game So if I thought I didn't understand football just from that result, the refereeing in the next game, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but I think it needs to be discussed, because as much as Everton are rubbish, as much as Frank Lampard is a terrible football manager, and as much as they're going to get relegated and they suck and I hate them, they should have had a penalty. This was as clear as day, and fair play to Lampard for coming out in the post-match, because in that 1-0 loss versus City, Everton had a clear as day handball penalty turned down by VAR. And even if you watch a match of the day, they were flabbergasted afterwards as well. What did you get to see it? Did you see Frank's reaction? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I watched all of this game, and it was quite a good game, actually. Even though it only was a 1-0, it was sort of quite an entertaining and open 1-0. Everton were a lot better than they had been recently. They were really pressing high up the pitch, and they gave City some problems. But like you say, it all comes down to that handball decision. I just don't understand how anyone can look at that in a studio at Stockley Park and not be saying, yeah, that's handball, you need to go and look at the screen.
Ridiculous.
And the thing is, they sort of try to clarify the handball law and make it less ambiguous by saying it's your sleeve. If it's below your sleeve, then it's handball. And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but people's sleeves are in different places. And also, what if the ball, like there, it did probably partly touch the sleeve, but it was also a lot of his arm. So it just, again, it comes down to VAR in itself is not the problem. The standard of refereeing in this country is the problem. It's only as good as the people that are using it.
Yeah.
And I completely make Lampard right. And yes, he's had an apology from Mike Riley, but that doesn't help you when you're in that situation. It's no good getting an apology when that point against a Man City team could be the difference between Premier League and Championship football next year. And it also, at the other end of the table, makes a big difference in the title race. So it's really affecting both ends. And I've spoken about refereeing a lot on the Pretty Bubbles podcast when we're discussing West Ham. It's not something I like talking about because it means you're not talking about the actual football and the things that are more fun. But it's got to improve, but I just can't see it happening anytime soon because the standard of referees are terrible.
Yeah, I agree. And even if you look at the Euros, if you look at the World Cup before that, they had VAR and they used it very well. It's just the refereeing and officiating in this country, unfortunately, that has caused such a... I'm also remembering like the goal line technology that kept Aston Villa in the Premier League, that when it was just turned off for that game when they should have had a goal against them. So yeah, it's been horrible for years. And unfortunately, a lot of title races, including the one where Liverpool ran City really close, are decided by some bad refereeing. City had an offside goal given against Liverpool that year, not that I'm still bitter 3 years later, and that won them the title, essentially. So unfortunately, at both ends of the table, it's a very regular thing, and unfortunately, it is something that comes up at this kind of time every single season. Hopefully, it won't affect the outcome too much.
It's just worth mentioning as well about the actual football. Loads of people obviously were looking at the lots of free hits played last week. Lots of people looking at the City attacking assets like Sterling, Mahrez, De Bruyne, and anyone else they could fit in. And it was Foden who chipped in with a goal, who a lot of people have moved off because he hadn't been doing the business for them. And all the bonus points went to City defenders. 3 for Cancelo, 2 for Stones, and 1 for Laporte and Diaz. Big at the back.
Yeah, big at the back. I did exactly as you just described. So I'm on a free hit. I moved Foden out. So I got Mahrez and Sterling in, which with any City attacker, you know you're taking a risk. It's part and parcel. Then if they come on, they could get a 1 point. They could get a 12 point. It's the risk you take. And it's why you can only ever own them on a free hit. But it's still very annoying. Let's move on then to the last game before we look at our teams and our plans, which is West Ham 1, Wolves 0. And a good result for you guys. On an FPL standpoint, absolutely useless. But for West Ham, a good result, and it keeps them in a running for that top 4 slot.
Yeah, it's a big result for West Ham, but also sort of a really, at the opposite end of that spectrum, it's a really bad result for Wolves. That's 2 losses in a row against top 4 rivals with their loss to Arsenal in the week as well. But yeah, like you say, from an FPL perspective, it did no one any favours. Clean sheets for West Ham, but no one's really on West Ham defenders at the moment. Cresswell, some people might still have him, but I think he's probably got a very low ownership. Souček goal, Antonio assist. I mean, I finally get Antonio out of my team and he gets an assist. And he also scored in the FA Cup last night as well. So hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. But yeah, Wolves were disappointed in this game. Jimenez didn't start. They made a lot of changes from the team that played Arsenal, probably because there was only 3 days between those games, and West Ham had a full week of rest before it. So it's sort of that fixture congestion could be catching up with them a little bit. They really should have taken the lead as well. Hwang missed a really good chance just before half time. And I think if you concede the first goal to Wolves, you're always in trouble. But if you score the first goal, they've only won once when they conceded the first goal this season. So that's very important against them. But yeah, overall, good result for West Ham, but very inconsequential from an FPL perspective.
Yeah, agreed. I also think with Antonio's return to form, I'm going to be selling him this week because I need to free up the funds elsewhere. I'm in the same boat. I could very much regret it. So I'm not looking forward to that at all. I think that helps pivot nicely, actually, into where we both are at the moment. So, Matt, from an FPL standpoint, how was your week?
Terrible. red arrows all round. I think I took the hit not without like making sure I didn't need to free hit because I still wanted those 2 free hits for later in the season. I did take a -8 just to sort of get through it, and also to get rid of a couple of players that I knew weren't going to be playing with a view to wildcard this week. And yes, taking a -8 into a wildcard does sound a bit odd, but I brought in Son. He obviously got the points for me. That was the main thing there. I also brought in Ben Mee. That went well. But yeah, I think it was sort of Cancelo and Dean both with clean sheets and Cancelo with the bonus points. The captaincy was an awful shout. 3 points all the way across my midfield apart from Son, and a big 6 from my double game week captain. So, and a big red arrow all round as well, down to 127,000 now after being so close to the top 100k last week. But I took the hit knowing it probably wasn't going to be my best week because I wasn't free hitting and a lot of people were. Hopefully I can make that back up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I think we've done reverse of each other because last week I was in a lot of pain. This week I've done quite well. And having free hitted, I made the choice to bring in Kane and Son and put the armband on Kane, and that worked out very well. So I was on 65 points overall. Treble Burnley, like you, like many people, just didn't work. The City double in midfield with Sterling and Mahrez didn't work, but luckily made up for it with Son and Kane, and then the likes of Cancelo just to put me over the top. Just on the back of that, actually, on the back of that free hit, I'm now up to about 45,000 in the world, which after my drops were about 60, 70k last week, can only be seen as a win. I'm now looking ahead to the next game week, which is, we've got a really hectic fixture schedule ahead because the next 2 game weeks are doubles. So for the first time in many years, I'm not afraid of taking a big hit because there's so many games to make it up. And if I take a big hit now, it's a risk, but it could be potentially really high reward. So that's how I'm looking at the moment. Presently, if you look at my planned transfers and what I'm looking at doing, it's going to be a -12. So I'm going to be replacing Antonio with Kane. I'm going to be replacing Foden with Kovacic. And I'm going to be replacing 2 defenders with Aït-Nouri and Rudiger or James. One of the 2 I've not quite decided yet. Probably Rudiger because it feels safer. But that's where I'm sitting at the moment. And I'd rather do that from a position of strength, having just got a green arrow, than a position of weakness like yourself. So you're wildcarding as a response to the red arrow, I would guess. So talk me through what your team looks like considering the upcoming mess of fixtures we have.
Yeah, it's tricky because, like you say, with the double in the next 2 weeks, trying to look at obviously short term, but also long term. I've still got 2 free hits as well, so they've got them in my back pocket ready for the likes of game week 30 and potentially at the time of the FA Cup semi-finals as well. We'll see how that goes. But at the moment, after doing some more tinkering over the last 24 hours or so, my squad, I'm still unsure on my starting 11 out of these players, has Sarr and Ramsdale as my 2 goalkeepers. My back 5 or my 5 defenders at the moment are, and this is big at the back. This is what we're all about.
This is why we're here.
My 5 defenders are Cancelo, Rudiger, James, Trent, and Robertson. That is so sexual. My midfielders are Willock, Salah, James Ward-Prowse, Ramsey, and Coutinho. And my 3 strikers at the moment are Jimenez, Weghorst, who I'm sort of considering moving out still. I've still got a little time, a couple of days before the deadline to decide on that. And I've bought in Brozier.
You bought in Brozier.
I thought you'd like that. He looked very good when he came on against West Ham last night, scored a goal as well. So I'm hoping that can kick him on into the next gear and sort of hopefully re-find a bit of form. Just not as much form as Jimenez would be nice.
I also don't like that you haven't got the end of season hero we all need. Ian Nacho. Good old Ian will come good. I'm certain of it. I'm looking at my squad for the next week, and I'm actually a bit concerned because presently it's set out, considering the doubles, in a 5-2-3 formation, which
Love that.
Doesn't really sound very appealing, but it is big at the back. So, and my subs bench doesn't feel right either because it's Jota, Kovacic, and Bowen. All three players who should probably be starting more often than not, and it feels dirty having Josh King starting over any of them.
I don't think you can start Bowen against Liverpool. Kovacic he's a good enabler, but he's never a massive point scorer, so I wouldn't particularly worry about having him on the bench either. So I think I don't think there's any of them that you can realistically bring in.
I think Kovacic is a bit of an unsung hero this year because he's been a brilliant player for Chelsea, but actually he was injured for most of the season and he's still on 60 points. If you look at his early season returns, he was picking up the same kind of points as Mason Mount, and he's available for 5 million versus 8, which Mount is. So I think Kovacic is a really, really shrewd FPL option. Saying that, he'll probably get 4 points over the double, so we'll have to wait and see. But I'm confident that he will do very well. Other than that, though, when does the next game week start? I believe it's a Saturday kickoff or a Saturday start for the game week. So 12:30, which means the deadline will probably be 11 o'clock. It normally is. Yep, Saturday the 5th of March at 11 o'clock. And we're starting with Leicester versus Leeds, which should be an absolutely awesome game. And finishing with the big at the back derby of Liverpool versus West Ham. How confident are you?
Oh, not confident at all. We've got a bad record against you guys in general. I just think we haven't. Last night excluded, we've been a little bit better defensively recently. Kept a clean sheet against Wolves. Conceded late against Man United a few weeks ago. Like in general, since Zuma's come back from his injury and cat kicking escapades, we have looked a lot better defensively. So that sort of fills me with some confidence that it won't be a rout, but I can't see us getting any points here. And that's why I've shipped Bowen out. Just because the fixtures aren't that great for West Ham coming up, and we go back to European football next week as well against perennial Europa League champions Sevilla. So I'm not confident about that either. But anyway, I can't see you not winning this game.
You won the reverse fixture 3-2, and West Ham looked sensational in that fixture. But Liverpool have won every single game in February. We've just won the most important trophy in the world, the Carabao Cup. That is just a Mickey Mouse competition, let's be honest. I say it when Liverpool don't win it, so it's fair that I say it when Liverpool win it. It's a Mickey Mouse competition. Same with the FA Cup, actually. Don't see much value in it, but that's a discussion for another day. FPL question. Who's your armband on for this week?
Currently, it is sat, and it's not going to stay this way, I'm fairly certain. It's sat on Jimenez. But I'm tempted for something a bit more fun to go to Coutinho.
Like it. And I feel like this is a really interesting week. I think if I had him, I would go really fun and go James Ward-Prowse.
Ooh, he has been in good form lately, and obviously he's a set piece specialist as well. Scored a penalty last night, so that would be a fun option.
If James Ward-Prowse got 14 points or something, and you captained him, think of that would put you straight into the top 100k. Food for thought as you're on a wild card.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout at all. I'm also sorely tempted, even though he's on a single, to give it to Salah, because then if he does blank, I don't mind too much as a West Ham fan.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I like Coutinho, but I don't trust him to pick up returns. Even against Southampton are in great form, he could really damage Leeds if they continue playing the way they have been. But I really struggle to justify that. For me, I may even put it on Rudiger, potentially, just because they've got the double now. in 28, and that double is a really nice one. So it's Burnley and Norwich. I can't see either of those scoring against Chelsea. So I think that could be an easy 12 points doubled is 24, and then Rudiger just loves getting forward and making a menace of himself from that centre-back position and seems to mop up bonus points. So for me, I think Rudiger's where the armband is going to go this week.
It's not a bad shout. Yeah, I'm tempted as well by any of the Chelsea players. I've got Rudiger and James as it stands. I'm tempted by both of them.
I don't think James is as nailed on, though. I think James could easily come on for 30 minutes. Either of those.
The thing is, the only reason I'm thinking that is Azpilicueta went off injured in the League Cup final, which is when James came on. So I'm hoping that means that not that I ever hope someone's injured, but I hope that increases the likelihood of James playing both games.
Well, I always hope that Marcus Alonso is injured forever, unless he's playing Tottenham. I mean, you murdered a child, but when you played Tottenham, you scored a great free kick a few times. So swings and roundabouts kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know what to say to that.
And we've gone down that route. Right. I think at that point is probably a good time to stop talking before we get really dark. So as we said at the beginning of the pod, like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter. We would love to get your opinions, hear what you're doing for this upcoming game week. And we'd just love to start interacting with more of you. So give us a shout on there. Thank you all for tuning in. And Matt, anything else to plug while we're here?
As always, if you're interested in West Ham in any way, shape or form, you can listen to me on the Pretty Bubbles podcast as well. We'll have another episode out soon talking about our FA Cup exit and also the upcoming European fixtures against Sevilla. But other than that, I'm on Twitter as well at Higgins92. Tom is at TomMadden92. So yeah, come and get involved. It'd be good to get involved with all the chat. Let us know your thoughts on everything. And obviously don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on any of your regular podcast platforms.
Absolutely. The next game week finishes next week on Thursday. So we'll likely be back on Friday morning with the next podcast and looking forward to speaking to you all then. Have a good week, guys.